Welcome to the CCDP podcast et bienvenue au podcast du CCDP.
This is the podcast for the Center on Conflict Development and Peacebuilding, where research meets practice in addressing some of the world's most pressing challenges.
The CCDP is the Graduate Institute's focal point for research in the areas of conflict analysis, peacebuilding,
and the complex relationship between security and development.
I'm Jennifer Thornquist, a research assistant and the podcast producer here at the Center we call the CCDP. We believe ideas matter, but so does making them accessible. In this show, you'll hear from scholars, practitioners, students, in engaging, clear conversations. Here's a preview of today's episode.
Well, this conversation is important because we are living in a shifting time, in a rebirth of a new global order, maybe or not.
This conversation is important because in a world where we see that increasingly again might is right and conflict parties and other actors try to resolve their conflicts through weapons and war rather than through dialogue and diplomacy, I think it's important to recall the important role of the United Nations.
This conversation is important because the UN has been historically the main actor for the maintenance of international peace and security.
This conversation is important because peace researchers need to increasingly connect their research experience and findings to the policy and practice side.
Our host today is postdoctoral researcher with the CCDP, Margaux Pinaud. She interviews 3 researchers who explored the impact of world politics on UN peace missions. Now to the show.
I am Margaux Pinaud. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the CCDP, and I was involved in the last part of the project on UN peace missions.
I am Fanny Badache, currently a lecturer at the University of Geneva, and I worked as the postdoc in the past 3 years for the project.
And I am Bilal Salayme. I was the doctoral researcher for this project, and currently I am a postdoctoral researcher at the Center on Conflict Development and Peacebuilding.
And I am Sara Hellmüller, a research professor here at the Graduate Institute, and I was leading the project. The name of the project is A Child of Its Time, the Impact of World Politics on UN Peace Missions.
Peace missions are the main instrument of the United Nations to maintain international peace and security, yet their future is uncertain. As UN Secretary-General António Guterres put it in the new Agenda for Peace in 2023, a transition is underway to a new global order. The unity of purpose expressed by member states in the early 1990s has waned. What are the implications of such shifts in world politics on UN peace missions? I explore this question today with 3 guests who conducted a 5-year research project here at the CCDP on this topic. Sara, Fanny, and Bilal, welcome and thank you for joining us. So I'd love to start us off by shedding some light on the project itself. Sara, can you tell us about the origin of the project? Why did you become interested in this topic and eager to dedicate 5 years to study it?
Thank you very much, Margaux. So I became interested in this topic because of a change I noticed in the way the UN was promoting peace or in UN peacebuilding. For my PhD, I spent more than a year in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the UN had deployed a mission there in 1999. And what I witnessed at the time was a sort of consensus amongst international actors that peacebuilding should be maximalist, so really aim at addressing the root causes of conflict. And then in my postdoctoral research on Syria, I noticed that this consensus was sort of waning and that there were many different approaches and ideas on how to make peace. So I noticed that kind of the way the UN is promoting peace and security is or was at a turning point, also sadly illustrated, of course, by the failures of the UN to address contemporary conflicts such as in Gaza, Ukraine, or Yemen and other contexts. So in this project, we sort of argue that this turning point in UN peacebuilding is linked to broader changes in world politics, and namely this shift towards a more multipolar world order. And so we wanted to look at more closely at how this kind of structural or tectonic shifts in world politics influence UN peace building, peacemaking, and peacekeeping. And we did so by kind of linking theories of international relations with peace research.
Fanny, what was the central question or problem that the project set out to answer?
Our main research question was, to what extent do changes in world politics impact UN peace missions? And by changes in world politics, we understood changes in world politics with the material dimension. Here you can think of the increased geopolitical competition that we observed for the past at least 15 years at the international stage. But also we understand changes in world politics with the ideational dimension. And here we refer to the contestation of the liberal international order. And secondly, we analyze changes in world politics and its impact at the mandate level for peace operations and at the implementation level.
Bilal, let me turn to you now. Can you tell us a bit about how you decided to approach these research questions? What methodologies did you use to collect and analyze data?
So thanks, Margaux, for this question. I think collecting data was important and essential part of our project, not only for conducting the analysis later on, but also because data on this topic itself was important to publish and to share with the researchers. So throughout the project, we built 2 datasets that is available now for the academic community and the practitioners. The first one was about the United Nations Peace Mission mandates dataset by coding the relevant resolutions of the peace missions and the renewation of these peace missions at the Security Council, or the resolutions that issued by the Security Council. And also, we had another dataset, which is United Nations Security Council peace-related speeches dataset that compiles speeches delivered at the Security Council during meetings or sessions that related to peace research in general, to peace missions, in general. And as I mentioned, these datasets are now available for researchers and practitioners. And also here I invite our listeners to download the app as well that we have for the United Nations Peace Missions dataset that make it also easier for them to access the data. We also conducted more than 100 interviews with diplomats, practitioners, and researchers. For analyzing this data, we used different and various methods in the policy and academic outputs that we produced. So, for instance, we used content analysis, descriptive analysis, mapping, the process tracing, and statistical testing as well.
So thank you, Bilal. Just to clarify, I know you conducted several case studies as part of the project. Can you just list the context that you reviewed?
We had actually different case studies. We had Syria, Yemen, Libya, and also we have DRC, we have Mali, and South Sudan as well as the 6 cases that our project looked into.
So thank you to all of you for setting us up on the project. It's really interesting. Clearly, data collection was a key aspect of the project, and one of the advantages of mixing all these different types of research methods is that you could respond to your research questions from different angles. So now we're very curious to hear about all that you learned. And from my perspective, there are 2 striking findings coming out of your research. The first is we now know that over 140 UN peace missions have been deployed since 1948 across the world, but their number and their scope has varied a lot across time. And then the second one would be that the shift to a multipolar world order in recent years has drastically impacted the activities and the effectiveness of political and peacekeeping missions. So I wonder if you can take us through these findings in more detail. Sara, can you describe the key trends that are coming out of the dataset? How is it advancing our understanding of UN peace missions to date?
Thank you very much, Margaux. So I think the key finding is really that peace missions indeed are truly children of their time, so that the world order in which they are deployed is very important and affects their type of missions, the number and mandate of missions. And then I would say, through the analysis, we identified 4 key trends. And the first one is really this decreasing number of peace missions overall in this new multipolar world. The last peacekeeping operation was deployed to Haiti in 2017, and one of the flagship missions of the UN in Mali was withdrawn at the end of 2023. A second trend is really this shift from peacekeeping operations towards more political missions. So while peacekeeping operations have numerically outnumbered political missions in previous periods, so in the more bipolar world order during the Cold War, as well as the unipolar world order in the immediate aftermath of the Cold War, this trend has recently been reversed. So we see more political missions than peacekeeping operations. A third trend is a trend towards more focused, what we call minimalist missions with fewer mandate tasks. Some scholars have called this kind of pragmatic peacekeeping, so really focusing on some of the key tasks of peace missions. And for instance, Guterres said or referred to this trend saying Christmas is over, referring to kind of this previously overloaded missions with a very, very high number of mandate tasks. So Christmas is indeed over. And the fourth trend is a trend towards outsourcing some of the tasks that the UN previously fulfilled with peace missions, either to states or regional organizations. And here we have, for instance, the example of the multinational security support mission in Haiti, which was UN authorized but led by Kenya, or a recent resolution adopted by the UN Security Council at the end of 2023, which foresees UN funding for AU-led peace support operations.
Thank you very much, Sara, also for making the links with the resolutions that are really taking place at the Security Council. And Fanny and Bilal, let me turn to you now. Can you elaborate on one or two findings that came out of the case studies you conducted? What surprised you the most?
Yes, of course. Maybe I would like to highlight two. First, what we observe is that world politics do not impact our cases in the same way and to the same degree. In some instances, it's easy to trace empirically the impact of world politics on our cases at the mandate level, at the implementation level. For instance, if you think of what happened in Mali, it was very easy to observe the impact of the geopolitical competition between France and Russia and how it impacted dynamics at the Security Council, but also on the ground. But in other cases, world politics are one factor among others, and the dynamics were not clear. And also the where politics are linked to other dynamics and mainly dynamics at the domestic level. And that would be my second key findings for me, is that although our initial point of departure was to focus on world politics, we quickly observed that dynamics at the domestic level were super important to understand our cases, especially how the dynamics at the global level are received, are interpreted, and are strategically used by domestic actors is key to understand the dynamics. So really the interlinkage between dynamics at the global level and at the domestic level is a key finding from our research. And when I say domestic actors, I'm thinking of the host states, of course, the political elites, national political elites, but also conflict parties.
Thank you, Fanny. Perhaps just to clarify a little bit, when you mean dynamics at the domestic level, what do you mean specifically?
I mean, for instance, how the operations is perceived, is understood by the host states, but also host states' interest with other actors, other security providers, other major powers, regional actors. And for the conflict parties, how the conflict parties interact with the missions and with the host states.
Absolutely, thank you. And Bilal?
I will add 2 or 3 points, maybe starting from what Sara ended with regarding the outsourcing. And here I wanted to highlight that one of the findings that within this shifting and contestation, we have more role for the rising regional powers. But at the same time, we saw that these rising regional powers are not posing any normative challenge to the whole architecture of peace in general, international peace and peace building, but rather they try to navigate their own way, and as if we are moving again to sort of self-help system of international peace building architecture. The second point that I want to highlight, and maybe somehow that's links to what Fanny said about the perception for the local actors and how they act and empowered throughout this process, that we are seeing also emergence of parallel processes of peacemaking to the UN-led peace processes. We saw that in Syria, we saw that in Libya, and these parallel processes are gaining ground against these multilateral United Nations-led peace processes. The last point that I want to highlight here is that with this overall changing and contestation, peacemaking becomes more transactional in nature, with less emphasis on on transformative approach, long-term solution, institution buildings, and inclusivity for rather more transactional approach between some of the international or regional actors and the conflict parties themselves.
Thank you, Bilal. And I think on the last 2 points, you and Sara published really interesting articles recently around transactional peacemaking in Syria. Do you want to give a bit of a teaser for these publications, what they're about, what you found?
Thank you very much. Yes, we recently published an article on Syria, Libya, and Yemen, arguing that indeed what Bilal just mentioned, that peacemaking becomes increasingly transactional, because we argue that in an increasing number of conflict contexts, we have what we call a conflation of war makers and peacemakers. The same actors that militarily support one of the conflict parties, they also offer sort of their peacemaking services, which then renders this context what we call, drawing from Alex de Waal's research, political marketplaces. So actors try to strategically position themselves in these political marketplaces, both through war making and peacemaking. And then we argue that this makes the kind of entire ecosystem of peacemaking more transactional, meaning that it's focused more on bilateral deals rather than multilateral institutions. It's focused more on the short term rather than the long term. And it becomes more exclusive and just focus kind of on the interest of the key actors rather than more inclusive and also kind of more comprehensive, involving more actors, including civil society and others.
Thank you. A really important topic today. Okay, let me move now to perhaps the last big section of our conversation. There's been an increasing emphasis in recent years, including in Switzerland, around the idea of science communication. And even during its mandate at the UN Security Council, Switzerland reiterated several times how important it was to translate scientific knowledge and connect it with multilateral discussions, including in relations to conflict prevention and resolution. And what's also really striking with your project is that from the beginning, it was anchored in real-world dynamics and really aimed to inform debates that were happening at the UN Security Council or at the UN more generally around the future of UN peace missions. So, Sara, can I ask you how you communicated about your work among policymakers, practitioners, and the wider public? And perhaps what lessons did you draw from this engagement?
Thank you very much. Yes, I think as a peace researcher, I have always been committed to making my research findings accessible to policymakers, practitioners, and the broader public. And I think especially in our field, and especially also in light of recent developments of increased defense budgets, etc., I think it's not just a nice to have that peace researchers communicate about their findings, but it's really almost an ethical obligation. And now for this project, since the very beginning, for instance, we designed the dataset on UN peace mandates in a way to already think about how can we also make it accessible, not just for quantitative researchers, but also for qualitative researchers, and then also for the broader public. And Bilal mentioned before the app that we developed. So we have developed a mobile app where all the information contained in the dataset is easily accessible. We also have a website with easy search functions, for instance. So it's really whoever is interested in UN peace missions, be it a high school student or an elected member on the UN Security Council, the information is out there on peace mission mandates. And then also, since the project coincided with Switzerland's first ever membership on the UN Security Council, we also wanted to kind of inform the broader public in Switzerland about the important role of the UN. So we also curated a pop-up exhibition on UN peace missions that shows the main facts about peace missions and also Switzerland's role in them. And the exhibition was showed in more than 10 very diverse locations, for instance, at the Palais des Nations in Geneva, also at the UN headquarters in New York, the Basel Peace Forum, at ETH Zurich, or even at Olma, St. Gallen.
Fanny and Bilal, what has been your experience in that area? How can your findings inform current debates and operations on the ground? And what specific recommendations can you make for the UN, for governments, or other relevant actors working in this area?
Thank you, Margaux. As you said, our research directly speaks to current debates within UN policy circles and also among scholars. But what is useful in our research is to have this long-term perspective. And as Sara said, we can say that peace operations are children of their time. They are anchored in world political dynamics. So it's not the first time that UN peace operations are in crisis or said to be in crisis. It's not going to be the last. So I think our research allows the UN or policymakers to take a step back and to see that the UN has always adapted despite changes in world politics. The second point I want to make is that, also jumping on what Bilal said, is that what we observe on the ground is an increase in the number and the variety of security providers. I think the UN should not be afraid of that, but should take this opportunity to distinguish itself, emphasize its strength, and also compare to these new security actors. And for instance, it should not shy away from its emphasis on human rights, women inclusion, etc., because it will allow the organization to put forward its added value.
Thank you, Fanny, also for emphasizing this question of long-term dynamics and how we learn also from the way the organization has adapted in the past. Bilal?
Yes, I think important point here is to manage the expectations. And that is important, especially in times when we have these shifting in priorities, but also in capabilities. So managing the expectation is important, mainly for the UN to maintain its legitimacy on the ground and its relevance as well, but also for interlocutors. I mean here the conflict parties, but civil society, the general public, etc. So it's important to highlight these important shiftings and that are taking place, but also what this shifting means for the different parties for their engagement, and to be maybe somehow having an honest dialogue on that. The other important implication, I think, or recommendation is to invest more in diplomatic outreach and political dialogue, especially in this time, to have also sort of synchronization between these different, what I mentioned as parallel peace processes, etc., and with the existence of different security providers, as Fanny mentioned. So more synchronization of this different approach and more investment in political dialogue will broaden the ground for peacemaking, especially in times when the UN as the lead international organization is being under question or even challenged.
Thank you, Bilal. And so if I understand, it's also for the UN to welcome its role as a platform for coordination of all the different initiatives and actors.
Yes, and also to be clear about that. So what is the role here to manage the expectation? Because one of the things that we had with our conversation with the conflict parties through the interviews, some of them have maybe, I would say, different expectations from the UN of the role of the UN, from the role of the Special Envoy Office, etc. So it's important to have a clear and honest dialogue on that, and also to take into consideration these different challenges shifting in world politics and how these are impacting the role of the mediators, the peace missions, etc., and to communicate that with the constituencies or the communities on the ground.
Thank you very much, Bilal, and to all of you. With all these valuable insights, what's next? What new questions are you eager to explore?
Thank you, Margaux. So I already started a new research project, another 5-year project on consent from conflict parties to UN peace missions. Because I think what we really saw also now in this project is that world politics are very important and they influence the design of UN peace missions, as we just mentioned. But of course, a UN peace mission falls or stands also with the cooperation from the conflict parties. First of all, it needs consent from the host state to be even deployed when it comes to peacekeeping operations. And then when it comes to the more good offices or political missions that may not be deployed, but still consent is a very important condition also in mediation endeavors and has been recognized. So I will sort of shift the focus, or I'm shifting the focus now away from the kind of international actors and also not looking at the hyper-local level in conflict context, but really towards the conflict parties, so towards more the national actors, And yeah, hoping for also very interesting insights in this project.
Thank you, Sarah, and congratulations on this project. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing where it goes. Fanny?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, this research project kind of triggers many other research questions. But of course, I look forward to kind of following the conversation or the deployment of a new peace operations in the near future, if any. I mean, it would be very interesting to understand now it's in this new world order how the UN member states, the Security Council will reach consensus in which context for which type of conflict is going to be, it's going to be interesting. And but also on the other side of the spectrum, in a sense, following more the exits of peace operations is, I think, important. What happens when the UN leaves, how the UN manages the transition, the exits, how domestic actors also kind of what is the role of domestic actors in this process, because I think, especially in the case of Mali that I studied during the project, it's a nice also way to kind of analyze the role and the effectiveness of a peace operation when it leaves, because you have a kind of a real experience when you see, okay, one day it was here, it was deployed, and the other day it's leaving. So what's happening on the ground? So in a sense, you can do a kind of counterfactual analysis. So what was the added value of the mission?
Thank you, Fanny. And yes, it sounds absolutely critical as we see a lot of peace missions being closed in different contexts.
Well, for me, it was interesting throughout this project to see how the agency of the local actors and the conflict parties is impacted by these shiftings. And we see that in different contexts. So in some of the contexts, this agency becomes more salient. In other contexts, it's less than that. And that also impacts this interaction between the local and the international, what Fanny already mentioned. So in some cases, we see that will lead to really articulating of parallel processes, but in other cases, that will not be the case. So the question of agency of the local actors and conflict parties and how it's impacted by all of these shifting and dynamics is an important question that I would like to look into in the upcoming research.
Sara, Fanny, and Bilal, congratulations on this impressive project, and thank you for sharing fascinating insights with us today. Are you interested in finding out more about the project? If so, then check out www.peacemissions.info and download the UN Peace Missions app, available on Apple and Google Store. And for more information, check the resource link section below.
CCDP Spotlight Podcast Season 2. Shining a light on bridging research and practice.